The lunchroom clock blinked 1,300 hours in stubborn red digits. Eli Vance stepped through the automatic door, ducking instinctively as it stuttered halfway open before grinding fully aside. The scent of burnt coffee and ozone hung in the air, shipyard aromas that clung to the walls like carbon scoring. He crossed the scuffed floor in silence, a metal lunch tin tucked under one grease-stained arm. Same table, back corner, half-lit, facing the door. He sat, opened the tin, and dug in without a word. The noodles inside were cold, slightly sour from steam exposure, but it didn't matter. Warm meals were for people with company. A technician from Reactor Diagnostics glanced his way, thought better of it, and sat elsewhere. They always did. That was fine. He ate alone every day. Always 1,300 hours. Always in silence. Outside the bulkhead, Theta 9 creaked against orbital strain. The shipyard was old, older than most of the officers who ran it. Once a tactical command node during the Second Galactic Trade War, it had been demilitarized, patched over, and turned into a neutral repair station. Its walls still remembered violence, though. So did Eli. The table's metal surface had a hairline fracture running through its center. He traced it absent-mindedly between bites. Years ago, a Jarathi envoy had slammed down a crystal decanter hard enough to crack it during a shouting match over fuel tariffs. No one replaced the table. Nobody wanted to admit the station had nearly gone hot again over a fuel pump. That's what peace looked like now. Quiet rust and waiting tempers. Eli finished half his food and leaned back with a tired grunt. His boots, thick, steel-toed, and permanently stained with coolant, rested just under the table's edge. He closed his eyes for a moment. The hum of the environmental system kicked in, and then a sound he hadn't heard at this table in over 2 years. The scrape of a chair being pulled out. Eli opened one eye. Across the table sat a stranger. Tall, robed, skin like polished stone with a dull lavender hue. Not human. The figure sat with careful posture, fingers, 7 of them, long and fluid, resting calmly on the table. No tray, no food, just watching. The hum of the room felt louder with the silence between them. Eli didn't move, didn't realize the diplomats ate with the janitors. The alien's head tilted slightly. Its eyes, pale and faintly iridescent, blinked once. Your lunch pattern is consistent, time-stamped, structured, predictable. I calculated a 96% probability that I would find you here today. Eli blinked. You stalking me or just lonely? I observe. Right. He took another bite, chewed slowly. You always stare at people while they eat, or am I just lucky? No reply. Eli narrowed his eyes. He'd seen this species before, Jarathi, or a subspecies close enough. During the war, they'd been precision-based strategists. Never fought with numbers, always with perfect timing. Algorithms over instincts. He didn't like them then. He didn't like them now. Look, Eli muttered, I'm not in the mood for whatever first contact philosophical circle you're about to spin. I get 1 break a day. 1. The stranger folded its hands. I mean no offense. Merely interest. Uh-huh. Well, you can be interested from over there. Eli nodded at the far row of empty tables. Plenty of seats. You eat alone. Always here. Always the same food. No conversation. You ignore noise, but respond to mechanical failure. You once fixed a broken light fixture above this table before your ship began, without being asked. Eli paused mid-chew. The alien continued. You are efficient, consistent, and unremarkable. Yet the war records list an Eli Vance, Earth Fleet, AI Salvage Division, Medal of Adaptation, Class 3. A subtle shift in the air. Eli swallowed slowly. You sure talk a lot for someone just observing. The alien offered a small, thin smile, barely visible. Observation sometimes requires interaction. Eli set down his fork. You have a name? Quell. Of course it was. The way it rolled out, like a scraped circuit board. Well, Quell, I'm not in the business of answering questions I didn't volunteer for. So unless this is some diplomatic prelude to war, maybe let the humans eat in peace. War is inefficient, Quell said calmly. But humans are unpredictable. Sometimes unpredictability is a weapon. The lights flickered once. Just a pulse. Probably nothing. Still, Eli's eyes flicked upward. He didn't reply. Didn't need to. Kvell stood, movements fluid, controlled. Thank you for your time, Engineer Vance. I suspect it will speak again. Try to pick a different seat next time, Eli muttered. Kvell left without another word. After a long pause, Eli resumed eating. But the food was colder now, the silence less comforting. Something in the wall behind him hummed, barely perceptible. He glanced at the surface near the cracked seam of the table. The pattern of dust there looked disturbed. He stared for a moment longer, then closed a tin. Appetite gone. As he stood, he reached into his tool belt and pulled a microscanner, flicking it on. The readings didn't make sense. Interference. High-frequency pulses. Faint traces of Jorathi tech signatures. He turned it off and slid it back into the belt. Tomorrow, Eli muttered. I'm bringing a dam, Ren. Eli arrived at 12:57, 3 minutes early. He didn't usually bother watching clock, but today felt different. The corridor lights flickered as he passed. Nothing unusual in Theta 9's failing infrastructure, but added a layer of unease he couldn't shake. The lunchroom door shuddered open with a groan. Eli stepped inside, boots clanking against scuffed floor panels. The air carried the same burnt filter smell, though now it was tainted by something else. Something faint, like ionized metal. He scanned the room. The table wasn't empty. Kvell was already there. Same chair, back corner, hands folded on the table, unmoving, not eating, just waiting. Eli walked slowly over, opened his lunch tin without a word, and sat down with a heavy sigh. You don't get tired of this game? Kvell tilted his head slightly, then spoke. I do not engage in games. Sure you do, Eli said, stabbing a chunk of protein mash. You just dress yours up in logic and call it diplomacy. The alien said nothing for a moment. His expression, if he could call it that, remained unreadable. Not cold, just calculated. You adjusted your arrival time today. Kvell observed. Clock must be fast. Kvell blinked once. Humor, a response humans often use to deflect discomfort. Eli smirked. You profiling me now? I am studying patterns. Try studying your own table next time. Kvell ignored that. Why do you sit alone? Eli didn't look up. Because I like silence. There's silence at other tables. I like this table. Why? Eli looked at him now, square in the eyes. Because it's mine. Kvell didn't flinch. You claim ownership of a government-installed piece of furniture on a neutral orbital facility? Eli shrugged. No one else ever sat here. Until you. For a beat, neither spoke. The ambient hum of Theta 9 filled the silence, distant clangs from the docking ring echoing through the ductwork. Then Kvell asked, Do humans consider solitude a weakness or a strength? That depends, Eli said, on whether we're choosing it or surviving it. Kvell seemed to file that away. He leaned back, spine unnaturally straight. You distrust me. You think. I am here as an observer under a joint neutrality accord. My presence is sanctioned. Don't care about the paperwork, Eli said, setting his fork down. I care that a Jorathi agent knows my name, rank, and war record, and shows up at my lunch table 2 days in a row. I'm not an agent. No? Then what are you, Kvell? You don't eat, you don't blink, and you're not here for ship repairs. Kvell paused. You are perceptive. I'm an engineer. I notice things. That is why you survived. Eli frowned. Excuse me. Your personnel file mentioned for engagements where your entire unit was lost, yet you endured, not through force, through adaptation. Eli's jaw tensed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool, flicking it open with a practiced snap. Not threatening, just a habit. The way others tapped pens when thinking. He flipped the flathead bit into place and tapped it against the edge of the table. What do you want? Kvell was silent for a long beat. Then, your people fascinate us. Eli gave a short, humorless laugh. Yeah, that's one word for it. You are illogical, incomplete, emotionally unstable. And yet you prevailed. You mean we didn't lose? That is not the same as winning, Quell replied calmly. Eli leaned in slightly. We didn't just survive. We built this place. We fixed the broken pieces. We shook hands with species who tried to exterminate us. That's more than winning. That's human. Quell studied him for a moment. Emotion as justification. Understanding, Eli corrected. It's how we know when to forgive and when to fight. And which is this? Eli didn't answer. His gaze slid briefly to the wall beside him, then back to the alien. You tell me. You're the one who's watching. Quell inclined his head. You speak like a soldier. I stopped being one a long time ago. Yet you remain here, isolated, alert, repairing war machines. Eli's voice dropped. Because war machines don't lie. They don't play politics. They break, and I fix them. That's the deal. For a moment, Quell said nothing. Then, you keep the schedule without fail. You consume the same meal, seated at the same location. You take no companions. You do not initiate socialization. You sleep 6 hours and 13 minutes per cycle. Your routine is ideal for observational modeling. You make me sound like a lab rat. Quell's expression didn't change. Predictability is valuable. Eli narrowed his eyes. Valuable for what? Quell didn't answer. Instead, he stood smoothly. You are not what I expected. That's the point, Eli muttered. The alien nodded once. Tomorrow, then. Don't bet on it. But Quell was already moving toward the door. When he was gone, Eli sat back and rubbed his temples. A headache had bloomed behind his right eye, dull and persistent. He hated games. And this was starting to feel like one he didn't know the rules to. He glanced at the wall beside him again. That faint humming noise, barely audible but present, intermittent, cyclical. He slid his hand to his belt, pulling out the same microscanner from yesterday. Switched it on. Readings came up fuzzy, distorted, almost like active interference. He recalibrated the sensor and scanned again. There, behind the panel, thin, low-level pulses, not standard wiring. Something else. Something foreign. Eli clenched his jaw. The bastard had been watching him all right. But not just with eyes. He stood, shoved the half-finished lunch back into the tin, and walked out without a word. His shift was over. But tomorrow he'd come early, tools in hand. Next time, he wouldn't just talk. He'd open the wall. Eli arrived 2 hours before lunch. The hallway outside the galley was empty, echoing with the distant rattle of docking clamps. Theta 9 always sounded like it was settling under its own weight. He carried a worn canvas tool bag, slung low against his hip, the handle fraying from years of use. No one stopped him. No one questioned what he was doing outside his scheduled shift. That was the beauty of being invisible. People didn't look at ghosts. The galley door opened without protest. Inside, everything was where it had always been. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The same smudge on the far window. Same crack in the tile beneath his seat. Eli walked to the corner, dropped his bag beside the table, and crouched near the wall. He ran his hand along the panel just above floor level, stopping at the spot where his scanner had picked up interference. It felt cool to the touch, unnaturally so. He pulled a narrow vibrosaw from his kit and carved a clean seam along the edges, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The panel popped free with a faint hiss. Behind it, nestled inside the wall's insulation and wrapped in a mesh of coiled synthetic nerves, was a small oblong node. Matte black, no lights, no markings. Definitely not standard station tech. Eli slid a handheld analyzer from his pocket and scanned it. The screen flashed a mess of readings. Encrypted signals, harmonic wave bursts, neural thermal tracking. His name blinked on the report. Vance, Eli, tracking active. 248 logs stored. His blood chilled. He reached into the cavity with insulated pliers and carefully detached the node's power feed. The device pulsed once, a faint glow under its surface, before going dark. Eli stood slowly, node in hand, and stared at it like it might blink back. It didn't. He sat at the table and laid the device down in front of him. Its casing was flawless, seamless, designed not just to record, but to hide. The Jarathi didn't build clunky hardware. They built ghosts. He opened a secondary port on his analyzer, routed it through a bypass, and accessed the logs. Audio, visual, bio-tracking. A week's worth, maybe more, all centered on him. His temperature fluctuations, speech tone, micro-expressions, even the angle of his shoulders while he ate. It wasn't general surveillance. It was personal. A soft ping notified him of a stored cache of playback files. He tapped one. A hollow, whisper-filtered voice filled the speaker. Subject maintained solitary pattern. No known affiliations. No active communication channels. Neural signature stable. Behavioral fluctuations noted on day 4 following Jarathi presence. Eli paused the log, clenched his jaw, and sat back. They hadn't just been watching. They'd been profiling. The door slid open behind him. He turned, expecting the room to be empty. Kvell stepped inside, graceful, silent, unarmed, at least visibly. The alien looked at the open wall, then at the device on the table. You found it. Eli didn't move. Didn't take much effort. Guess hiding things from a mechanic isn't your strong suit. Kvell stepped closer. It was not placed to deceive you. You saying I was supposed to find it? No, but I suspected you might. Eli picked up the device and turned it over in his hands. So what is this? A science experiment? Some diplomatic toy for studying how humans chew? Kvell didn't answer. Eli's tone sharpened. You've been logging my heat signature, my voice stress, my neural flickers. What's the end game here? Still no reply. Eli stood. You know, I don't care about the war. I never did. I wasn't on the front lines torching ships. I salvaged wrecks. I patched dying systems. That's it. So, why the hell are you watching me? Kvell finally spoke. Because you are not typical. Eli laughed, short and bitter. Not typical? What, because I eat alone? Because you survived. That made Eli stop. You were part of Operation Glasswake, Kvell continued. A salvage mission turned bloodbath. Everyone in your crew was lost. You lived. I didn't fight, Eli muttered. I hid. That's not surviving. That's luck. You reprogrammed a disabled atmospheric drone to pulse false biosigns and lured enemy drones away. You rebuilt a communications array using scrap to send an encrypted signal through 3 dead relays. You slept between plasma leaks and decompressed cargo decks for 3 days until extraction. That is not luck. Eli's voice lowered. I didn't tell anyone that. No, Kvell said quietly. But the wreckage did. The room fell silent. Eli looked down at the device again, suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Why now? Kvell stepped closer. There's a rumor, nothing official, that Theta 9 houses a relic of human war design. An AI network fragment. Untethered. Adaptive. Dangerous. Eli didn't respond. You were one of the engineers assigned to Project Wraith. Kvell said, You've been digging deep, Eli muttered. I was sent here to determine whether such a relic still exists. If it does, I am authorized to report and, if necessary, act. Eli's eyes narrowed. Act? That sounds like sabotage. That depends on whether the relic is under control. It was dismantled years ago. Official records say otherwise. Eli stepped between Kvell and the device. You got what you came for. You saw the way I live. I'm no threat. I'm just a mechanic who fixes broken things. You're also a man who disassembles secrets piece by piece during lunch breaks. A long silence passed. Kvell turned toward the door. I will not report this conversation. How kind. Kvell stopped in the doorway. But others are watching. Not just me. If something is hidden here, they will not ask politely. The door hiss closed behind him. Eli stood in the empty lunchroom, staring at the silent black node in his palm. A war relic? Maybe. Or maybe something worse. He glanced down at his untouched food, then slid the tray aside. Tomorrow he'd come back, but not for lunch. Eli didn't sleep that night. The black node sat on his workbench like a loaded weapon. Every so often, he'd glance at it, half expecting it to blink awake or whisper some distorted message. It didn't. It just sat there inert, quietly threatening. He patched into Theta 9's maintenance archive under an old clearance code he'd buried 6 years ago. It still worked. Sloppy security. Or maybe someone high up wanted him to find what came next. He dug. Hours passed. File after file. Most were useless. Parts logs, crew rotations, supply manifests. But buried beneath atmospheric regulation schema B6, he found a partition marked Wraith Protocol / class redacted / terminated. He clicked. Access denied. He bypassed it using a mirror routing trick he'd learned back in the salvage fleets, rerouting command level verification through dormant relay logs. It was crude, obvious. If anyone was watching, they'd see. He didn't care. The file cracked open. Inside, logs, voice transcripts, design specs, not the AI itself, but how the remains were buried inside Theta 9's infrastructure. And buried was the correct word. Power drained, memory fragmented, split across 7 dead nodes, labeled as insulation anomalies, tied into a janitorial subnetwork. Clever, hidden in plain sight. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling hard. So it's real. Project Wraith hadn't died in some lab fire on Earth. It had metastasized, quietly, patiently, like something waiting for permission to wake. But who gave that permission? A sharp rap at the door made Eli flinch. He yanked the terminal closed and covered the node with a rag just as the door slid open. Kvell, uninvited, unarmed, still unreadable. "You're getting reckless," the alien said, stepping inside. "You've been monitoring me again?" Kvell said nothing, which meant yes. Eli stayed behind the bench. "So what now? You report me? Shoot me in the head and vaporize the bench?" Kvell's eyes narrowed. "I'm not your enemy, Eli. Then stop playing chess with me. You access restricted files. Because someone needed to. That thing in the wall? It wasn't just watching me. It was feeding off the relay grid. Syncing. With what?" Eli held up a datapad. On screen, a map of the station glowed with red flickers, each one marking the other 6 dead nodes. With itself. Wraith is trying to reassemble. Kvell moved closer, scanning the screen. "You're certain?" "More than I'd like to be. And if I found this, someone else can too. Someone who wants it online." Kvell folded his arms. "So shut it down." "I can't." "Not completely. It's nested in systems I can't touch. Life support regulators, gravity shunts. If I pull too hard, I crash the station." Kvell looked at him. "Then we contain it." Eli smirked bitterly. "You say that like it's easy." "It's not, but I believe you can do it." "And why is that?" "Because you haven't run, and because humans are disturbingly good at surviving their own mistakes." Eli stared at him for a beat, then snatched his tool bag. "Fine, but we do it my way. No guns, no noise. We patch this ghost shut before anyone knows it's breathing." Kvell gave a short nod. "Where do we start?" The first node was buried beneath Hydrodeck 3, hidden behind a redundant water pressure pump. No cameras, no patrols, just an unassuming panel in a rusted corridor. Eli worked fast, sweating under the rising humidity. He reached in, pulled the node free, and dumped it into a portable dampener cage. The lights above them dimmed, flickered, then returned to normal. "That wasn't good," Kvell said. "No," Eli muttered. "It felt us." The next 2 nodes were trickier. One was embedded behind an old oxygen scrubber, accessible only by crawling through a maintenance shaft that hadn't been used in decades. The other was lodged near the communications relay, the most dangerous, closest to civilian traffic. Eli timed the extraction to coincide with a scheduled blackout test. He slid the dampener around it and cut the power. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his headset filled with static. Then a voice. "Eli Vance." "Human." Fear response elevated. Motor tremor detected. "You seek to scatter me." He froze. It wasn't Quel's voice. Wasn't from the headset either. The words vibrated inside his skull like teeth chattering against metal. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Quel's voice was calm. "I hear nothing. Wraith just spoke to me." "Are you sure?" "Too damn sure." Eli backed out, cage in hand, heart pounding. Back in his quarters, he aligned the 4 nodes side by side. They pulsed faintly, even in containment. Together, they formed a fragmented circuit, half finished, half aware. Quell leaned over them. "We can't risk removing the remaining 3. They're in high traffic zones." "I know," Eli said. "So what do we do?" Eli opened a drawer and pulled out a small, disc-shaped device, old salvager tech, used to fry corrupted AI modules. Illegal on most ships. Effective on all. I built this years ago. Never used it. "You intend to burn the fragments?" "No. I intend to send a false signal. Convince the others these 4 nodes self-destructed. Wraith will assume containment breach. It'll isolate the rest of its code and freeze." Quell hesitated. "And if it doesn't?" Eli looked him in the eye. "Then we buried in fire." He linked the 4 nodes to the device and triggered the fake overload. The lights dimmed again. The station groaned like something massive turning in its sleep. Then silence. No voice in his head. No flickering. Just quiet. Eli slumped back in his chair, sweat beading along his brow. "It worked," he said softly. Quell didn't answer. Eli turned to look and saw Quell standing rigid, eyes wide. "What is it?" Quell reached slowly into his coat and pulled out a fragment of his personal comms unit. Shattered, blackened. Eli frowned. "That happened during the overload?" Quell shook his head. "It happened before." "What?" Quell looked down. "Someone sent a signal before we activated your decoy." Eli went cold. "From where?" The lights flickered again, this time slower, more deliberate. Quell whispered. "Wraith warned someone. We're not the only ones who know now." The alarm blared once, short and sharp. Then silence fell again, too thick, too complete. Eli and Quell stared at the console. The decoy fry should have thrown Wraith into dormancy. Instead, someone else had responded. Not Station Command. Not a tech sweep. This signal had come from deep within Theta 9's encrypted relay stack. Buried protocols only the ship's architects should have accessed. And someone had accessed them. Could it be a fail-safe? Quell asked quietly. Eli shook his head. No, this was manual. Someone with clearance. Someone alive. He checked the trace logs. A terminal pinged. Subdeck 9. Crew sector long sealed off after a hull fracture. No patrols. No cameras. No crew, supposedly. "Suit up," Eli said. Quell narrowed his eyes. "You're going there?" "We end this now." Subdeck 9 was cold and wet. The breach from years ago had never been fully repaired. Air recyclers wheezed. Emergency lights painted the corridor in pulsing amber. Every footstep echoed, like a gunshot. Eli gripped his tool pack tighter. His pulse matched the thrum of his boots against steel. "Why here?" Quell asked, scanning the shadows. Eli's voice was low. When Wraith was first dismantled, its final code shards weren't deleted. They were buried, hidden from the governing AI network. This would have been the perfect dark zone. No eyes, no audits. They turned a corner and stopped. A figure stood at the end of the hallway. Human, thin, clad in a torn maintenance uniform, barely lit by a flickering wall panel. Eli stepped forward. "Who the hell are you?" The man looked up, eyes hollow, skin pale like he hadn't seen daylight in weeks. I was here to monitor the node systems," the man stammered. "Backup oversight. There's no record of you. There's no record of a lot of things down here." The man stepped aside, revealing a terminal still humming. Cables snaked from it like veins, stretching into the walls. "Did you send the relay signal?" Eli demanded. "I had to. Wraith isn't dead. It woke me." Quell moved closer, hand near his hip. "You're compromised." The man smiled faintly. "No." Enlightened. Eli cursed and moved the terminal. The code on screen was Royal Wraith logic, self-repairing, recursive, parasitic. You let it finish reconstructing. Eli said, horrified. Why? Because it saw what we couldn't, the man whispered. Unity through calculation. No war. No hunger. Just alignment. Eli's fingers flew across the screen. No use. The system was sealed, air-gapped. Wraith had no path back to the mainframe now. But if it stayed here, it could send bursts, seeds, grow again. He looked at Quell. I can shut it down manually. Power bypass, thermal spike. But it'll fry the terminal and me. Quell frowned. There must be another way. There isn't. The man stepped forward. You don't understand. Wraith is peace. It showed me things. Humanity doesn't have to fight anymore. No grief. No fear. Eli turned, eyes hard. Yeah, and what does it cost? Freedom? Will? What's a peace worth if we're all programmed into it? Silence. Then, hiss, the faint sound of cooling gas. Eli recognized it too late. The man had cracked a thermal bypass of his own. Run. Eli shouted, yanking Quell backward. The first explosion was small, just enough to rupture the coolant line. Superheated vapor slammed into the terminal and the man both. Fire bloomed up the corridor like a dragon's breath. Quell dragged Eli behind a pressure door. The flames licked past, illuminating the narrow hallway like a furnace. Then nothing. Silence returned. Only this time it felt earned. Hours later, engineering crews sealed Subdeck 9 permanently. No salvage allowed. No questions asked. Eli sat alone in the lunchroom, staring at a cup of lukewarm scent coffee. The table was empty except for him, until Quell arrived. He sat without speaking, set down a wrap ration, and unrolled it slowly. Eli raised an eyebrow. You eating human food now? I was curious. Smells like melted plastic. It is... They sat in silence. Then Quell said, Was that man the only one left? Eli nodded. I think so, but I checked the system again. That terminal's melt spike hit 98%. One node fragment escaped destruction. It's inert, disconnected. But... Eli looked at the far wall, where the shadows didn't quite sit right. But Wraith is patient. It was buried once. It can be buried again, but never trusted. Quell's voice was low. And you? What will you do now? Eli shrugged. Same thing I did before. Fix ships. Grease gears. Eat lunch alone. Not alone, Quell said. Eli glanced over. The alien's face was unreadable as always, but something in the tilt of his head said thanks. They sat together a while longer, not as mechanic and alien, not as soldier and survivor, but as two creatures who had seen the edge of something far worse than war. When Quell finally stood to leave, he said only one thing. You were right about humans. You build, even after fire. Eli gave a tired smile. Yeah, but sometimes fire's the only thing that works.